The saloon doors swung open, and the laughter of drunken cowboys echoed off the wooden walls. At the far table, a young Apache woman sat alone, her back straight, her eyes calm. The men thought she was an easy target. They didn't know who she was, or what she was capable of. Dust clung to every surface of the Red Spur saloon. The air reeked of whiskey, sweat, and the faint trace of gun oil. Piano keys stumbled in the corner, half-drunk notes that barely covered the rising laughter of a group of cowboys crowding the bar. They had ridden in from the southern trail, boots caked in mud, tempers sharpened by cheap liquor and the heat of late afternoon. At a table near the wall, away from the raucous crowd, an Apache woman sat with a tin cup in her hands. She wore a plain buckskin jacket over a faded dress, her long, dark hair tied loosely behind her shoulders. She had been riding for days, and the saloon was supposed to be just a stop for water, maybe a meal, nothing more. But she could feel the eyes on her the moment she stepped through the swinging doors. The men noticed too. A scar-faced cowboy nudged his friend and grinned. "Look at that," he muttered, loud enough for half the room to hear. "Redskin thinks she belongs here." His buddies chuckled, their voices carrying across the room like a dare. She didn't flinch. She lifted the cup to her lips, steady, eyes fixed on the warped boards of the table. To her, this wasn't new. Every town, every saloon, every crowded room full of men who thought they could measure her worth by her silence. The tallest cowboy stood and sauntered toward her table, spurs jingling with every step. He tipped his hat mockingly and leaned down, close enough for her to smell the whiskey on his breath. "You lost, girl? Ain't no place here for the likes of you." Her hand tightened around the tin cup. She kept her voice low, even, "Sit back down." The words, quiet as they were, cut through the noise of the saloon. The piano faltered, the laughter thinned, and even the bartender froze with a bottle half-tilted. The cowboy blinked, then barked a laugh, thinking he had found sport. But when she finally lifted her eyes to his, there was no fear in them, only steel. And that was the moment the room shifted, though the men didn't yet know it. They thought they had cornered prey. Instead, they had just woken a storm. The tall cowboy's laughter boomed, bouncing off the saloon walls. "Hear that, boys? She told me to sit down." His friends roared, slapping the bar, spitting tobacco into the sawdust. The bartender shifted uneasily but said nothing. This was the kind of trouble men learned not to interfere in. The Apache woman didn't move. Her fingers rested lightly on the table, her back perfectly straight. She had the air of someone who had weathered worse storms than drunken men in a saloon. The cowboy leaned closer, his shadow falling over her. "What's your name, girl? Or should we just call you Squaw?" His words dripped with contempt, meant to humiliate, to draw laughter from his gang. Her eyes flicked up again, sharp and unblinking. "My name isn't yours to use." A murmur rippled through the saloon. The defiance was quiet, but it cut deeper than a shout. The cowboy's grin faltered. He wasn't used to being challenged, least of all by a woman, and never by an Apache. One of his friends called out from the bar, "Careful, Jed, don't let her bite." More laughter followed. Jed slammed his hand down on the table, making the tin cup rattle. "I don't think you understand, sweetheart. When we talk, you answer. That's how it works here." Still, she didn't flinch. Her calmness was unnerving, a mirror reflecting back his bluster until it looked foolish. She spoke again, her voice low but carrying, "Walk away while you can." The words landed like stones in still water. The laughter dimmed. The piano player quietly slipped his hands from the keys, letting silence spread. Everyone knew the saloon could turn into a powder keg in moments, and right now sparks were flying. Jed's face darkened. "You think you scare me?" He straightened, puffing his chest, trying to reassert control. His hand drifted to his belt, brushing the handle of his revolver, not drawing it but letting everyone see he could. From behind the bar, the bartender cleared his throat. "Easy now, Jed. She ain't hurting nobody. Let her be." Jed snapped his head toward him. "Shut your mouth, old man. This don't concern you." The Apache woman finally moved, slow and deliberate. She set the cup down, pushed back her chair, and stood. She wasn't tall, but the way she carried herself erased the difference. Her voice cut through the tension like a blade. "You've had enough chances. Jed smirked, though unease flickered in his eyes. Or what? You'll cry for your chief to come save you. His men chuckled weakly, the bravado thinning. She stepped forward, closing the space between them. Her gaze never left his. I don't need anyone to save me. Jed opened his mouth to retort, but before the words formed, her hand shot out. In one swift motion, she grabbed his wrist just as it hovered near his revolver. The movement was fluid, practiced. With a twist, she forced his arm down against the table, the wood groaning under the sudden pressure. Jed let out a grunt of surprise, his face contorting in pain. Gasps filled the saloon. No one had seen her move until it was already done. Jed tried to pull back, but her grip was iron. His friends pushed off the bar, ready to rush in, but hesitated at the sight. One man, bigger and stronger, held fast by a woman who didn't even break a sweat. Her voice was calm, almost whispering, but every ear caught it. You draw that gun. You don't leave this saloon alive. For a long moment, no one breathed. Jed's face reddened, sweat beading on his brow. His pride screamed louder than the pain, but even he knew he had miscalculated. She released him suddenly, letting his arm slam back onto his side. Jed stumbled, his hand hovering near the revolver, but not daring to draw. The room stayed silent, heavy with disbelief. Finally, one of his gang barked out a forced laugh. She's got spirit, I'll give her that. But the sound was hollow, an attempt to break the tension that only made it sharper. Jed straightened, face twisted with rage and humiliation. He jabbed a finger at her. You'll regret that. Nobody makes a fool out of me. She didn't answer. She just picked up her tin cup again, calm as before, and sat back down. The piano player, nervous, tried to start playing again, but the notes were shaky. The bartender wiped the counter, pretending not to see, but his eyes flicked between Jed and the Apache woman. Everyone in the room knew this wasn't over. Jed backed away slowly, glaring at her the whole time. He muttered to his men, who gathered around him like a pack waiting for orders. Their voices dropped to low growls, planning, conspiring. The Apache woman sat alone, the weight of the room pressing in, but her face betrayed nothing. She sipped from her cup as if nothing had happened. But in the saloon's dim light, every patron could see it clearly. A storm had been set in motion. And when Jed finally pushed through the swinging doors, his men trailing behind him, the silence left in their wake was worse than their noise. It wasn't peace. It was the quiet before something far more dangerous. The Red Spur Saloon slowly exhaled once Jed and his men stormed out. A murmur of voices returned past, but it was quieter, cautious as if no one wanted to draw too much attention. The bartender leaned on the counter, wiping the same spot again and again, his eyes darting to the Apache woman who sat unmoved, sipping her drink as though nothing had happened. "Never seen anything like that?" someone whispered near the piano. "She made him fold without even drawing." The woman ignored it all. She had grown used to being the subject of whispers, disbelief, contempt, sometimes admiration, but it never mattered. What mattered was survival. And she knew men like Jed. Humiliation burned hotter than whiskey, and he would not let the wound rest. Outside, boots scraped the wooden porch. Jed's men clustered around him in the fading light, voices low and tense. "She made a fool out of you in front of the whole damn saloon," one hissed. Jed's jaw worked furiously. "Shut up. I'll deal with her." Another spat into the dirt. "Why wait? We outnumber her 10-1. Nobody inside's gonna stop us." Jed shook his head, wiping sweat from his brow. "Not here. Too many eyes. Too much talk. We wait. She's alone. She'll have to walk out sooner or later. That's when we'll teach her what happens when you cross me." His men nodded, some grinning, others uneasy. They weren't cowards, but they knew the kind of look she'd given Jed. Calm, steady, like someone who had nothing left to lose. Back inside, the Apache woman finished her drink and set the tin cup down with quiet precision. She rose from her chair, straightened her jacket, and walked toward the bar. The room parted for her without a word, men shifting out of her path, some with respect, some with fear. The bartender cleared his throat nervously. "Miss, maybe best you stay a while. Let 'em cool off." She glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "They won't cool off." The old man sighed, nodding. Then at least don't leave through the front. There's a back door leads to the alley. She considered his words and then gave the faintest nod. Thank you. He swallowed hard, realizing she wasn't running, just choosing her ground. As she stepped into the shadowed alley, the air was cooler, carrying the faint smell of horses and dust. The back door creaked shut behind her. She adjusted her stride, calm but alert, every sense tuned to the quiet. Sure enough, the shuffle of boots came from the street ahead. Jed's men weren't subtle. They wanted her to hear them, to know they were waiting. A trap, but a clumsy one. She paused, eyes narrowing, then turned into the narrow passage between two buildings. The moonlight cast long shadows, and her footsteps echoed against the wooden walls. She moved steadily, not rushing, not hesitating. From the main road, Jed's voice carried, "Thought you could embarrass me, did you? You think being Apache makes you tough? Tonight you learn your place." His men laughed, but it was thin, nervous. They fanned out, their shapes dark against the lamplight. The woman stopped at the mouth of the alley, facing them squarely. Her hands rested loosely at her sides, no weapon visible, but the stillness in her stance radiated danger. "You should have walked away," she said, her voice steady, almost soft. Jed stepped forward, puffed up with rage. His revolver gleamed at his hip, but he didn't draw, not yet. He wanted to see fear, to savor the moment before breaking her. "You don't tell me what I should have done," he sneered. "You're going to beg before this night is over." The woman's eyes flicked past him, scanning the circle of men. She counted 8. They shifted uneasily under her gaze, each suddenly aware of how quiet the night had become. No horses stirred, no dogs barked, only the faint creak of wooden signs in the breeze. Then, without warning, she spoke again, sharper this time. "First one of you reaches for a gun won't live to see dawn." The words cut deep. A few men exchanged glances, hands twitching near their belts but hesitating. Jed barked a laugh to cover his unease. "She's bluffing. Look at her. No gun, no knife. She's just a mouthy squaw." But even as he said it, something in him wavered. He remembered the crushing grip on his wrist, the unshakable calm in her eyes. The woman took one slow step forward. Her boots echoed in the dirt. She didn't break eye contact, didn't blink. Jed's hand hovered near his revolver, torn between pride and instinct. He wanted to draw, to prove control, but every fiber of his body screamed that if he moved too fast, he wouldn't make it. Behind him, one of his men cursed under his breath. Another muttered, "Maybe we ought to leave it, Jed." "Shut up!" Jed roared, his voice cracking. He stepped closer, face twisted in rage, but his bravado rang hollow. The Apache woman tilted her head, eyes locked on his. Last chance. The gang stiffened, caught between loyalty and fear. Jed's hand trembled near the grip of his revolver, his pride battling his survival instinct. The street was silent, every second stretching longer, tighter, until it felt like the whole town was holding its breath. Then, from the far end of the road, the sharp crack of boots against wood echoed, a new figure stepping into the lamplight. Every head turned, and the Apache woman's lips curved into the faintest, knowing smile. The street froze as the sound of boots echoed steadily through the lamplight. Every man in Jed's gang turned, hands twitching near their belts, trying to see who dared step into the tension. Out of the shadows emerged a man, broad-shouldered, weathered, his face lined from years in the desert sun. He wore no badge, no uniform, just a worn duster coat and the kind of silence that commanded attention. A rifle rested casually in the crook of his arm, not raised, but present. The Apache woman's gaze lingered on him briefly, then returned to Jed, unbothered, but the faint curl at the corner of her mouth betrayed recognition. Jed spat into the dirt, trying to mask his unease. "Who the hell are you?" The man stopped just short of the circle, his voice gravelly, low. "Someone who doesn't like watching drunk boys play with fire." A ripple of laughter rose from the gang, nervous and brittle. One of them sneered, "Looks like some old ranch hand thinks he's a hero." The man ignored them, eyes fixed on Jed. "Let her be." Jed barked a laugh, too loud, too forced. "You got no idea what you're stepping into, old man. This ain't your business." The newcomer tilted his head, eyes narrowing. She just made it mine. The words landed heavier than gunfire. For a moment, silence weighed on the street again. Jed's pride swelled, desperate to reclaim control. He gestured sharply at two of his men. "Teach him what happens to folks who don't mind their own." The pair hesitated, then stepped forward, their spurs clinking in the dust. The Apache woman shifted her stance slightly, prepared, but the man raised one hand, stopping her without words. In a blur, his rifle's butt swung down. The first cowboy crumpled to the dirt before he even drew his pistol. The second lunged clumsily, but the man sidestepped, driving a boot into his knee with a sickening crack. The cowboy howled, collapsing. The street went still. Jed's gang, moments ago full of bravado, faltered at the sight of two men, down in less time than it took to spit. Jed's jaw clenched. He didn't like being shown up twice in the same night, first by the Apache woman, now by this stranger. Rage twisted his features. "Both of you think you can humiliate me." He ripped his revolver from its holster, arm shaking with fury. Before he could level it, the woman's voice rang out steady and sharp. "Don't!" Jed froze, gun halfway raised. He could feel her eyes on him, cold and unyielding. And behind that, the quiet weight of the man's rifle ready to swing again if needed. One of Jed's men whispered hoarsely, "Jed, maybe let it go." But Jed was too far gone. Humiliation burned hotter than logic. He turned his gun toward the woman, finger tightening on the trigger. The stranger moved but stopped when he saw the Apache woman lift her own hand, palm open, steady. She wasn't pleading. She was daring. Her words cut through the night, soft but lethal. "If you draw on me, you better not miss." The silence was suffocating. Jed's finger trembled. His pride screamed to fire, but deep inside, some instinct clawed at him to stop. Then a sound broke the moment, the distant jingle of spurs, more boots, more voices. From the far end of the street, lanterns bobbed in the dark, other townsfolk, drawn by the commotion, forming small clusters in the shadows. They didn't speak, but their presence pressed on Jed like a weight. He could feel the eyes, the judgment. If he fired now, there would be no hiding what he had done. Jed's gun wavered, sweat trickled down his temple. Finally, with a guttural curse, he shoved the revolver back into its holster. "This ain't over," he growled, glaring at both the Apache woman and the stranger. "You'll pay for this, both of you." He jerked his head at his men. Reluctantly, they backed away, dragging the injured with them, muttering under their breath. The street slowly emptied, their shadows melting into the night. The stranger lowered his rifle, exhaling quietly. He turned to the woman, studying her. She met his gaze without a word, unshaken. "Didn't think I'd find you here," he said finally. Her expression hardened. "You should have stayed gone." For the first time that night, the saloon's onlookers caught a glimpse of something deeper, history between them. A past neither was eager to revisit. The man adjusted his coat, eyes narrowing. "Jed won't let this lie, you know that." She nodded once. "Then let him come." The crowd, sensing the storm had only just begun, slipped back into the saloon, whispers rising like smoke. The piano never started again that night, and out in the street, under the thin glow of the lamps, two figures stood in silence, bound not by choice, but by the certainty that the trouble was far from over. The street had quieted, but the silence wasn't peace. It was heavy, like air before a storm. The Apache woman adjusted her jacket and turned toward the alley, intent on leaving. The stranger fell into step beside her, his boots crunching softly in the dust. "You could have used the back door and been gone," he muttered. "Instead, you stood your ground." She shot him a sharp glance. "You think running would have kept them off me?" He didn't answer. They reached the edge of the alley, the saloon's lamplight fading behind them. She stopped, turned fully toward him. "Why are you here?" His jaw tightened, eyes searching hers. "Because trouble follows you." Her laugh was humorless. "Trouble follows all of us. You're just too proud to admit it." The words landed hard. He exhaled slowly, gaze drifting toward the horizon where the night stretched endless. "It's been years. Thought maybe you'd changed." She folded her arms. "Changed into what? Something easier to forget?" The bitterness in her tone caught him off guard. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Instead, he shifted, his hand brushing the worn leather strap of his rifle. Jed won't stop. You humiliated him in front of his men. He'll gather more. Wait for the right time. I know, she said simply. You're not afraid. Her eyes hardened. I've lived with fear longer than you've known my name. The man's face softened. Just for a moment, he studied her, seeing not defiance but endurance carved deep into her bones. Memories stirred, long nights by campfires, the weight of choices neither had wanted to make. You should leave this town before sunrise, he murmured. She shook her head. Leaving only teaches men like Jed that they can push you out. I won't give him that. Her voice carried steel, but behind it, he sensed something else, weariness, maybe even loneliness. He wanted to press, to ask where she had been all these years, what scars she carried now, but her eyes warned him off. Instead, he asked, Got a place to stay? Her silence was answer enough. He sighed. Then you'll stay at my cabin, out by the ridge. It's safer than the open street. She hesitated, lips pressing into a thin line. Trust was not something she gave freely. Finally, she nodded once. For the night. They walked in silence, the town fading behind them. The dirt road stretched under a pale moon, the sound of crickets filling the spaces where words refused to come. At the cabin, a small weathered structure tucked against the ridge, he lit a lantern, casting a dim glow across the wooden walls. She stepped inside cautiously, scanning the room the way a hunter studies a clearing. Old habits, unbroken. He set the rifle near the door. Ain't much, but it'll keep you safe. She sat at the table, her hands resting on the worn surface. For a moment, she looked smaller, younger, as though the fight at the saloon had drained something she would never show. He poured water into a tin cup and slid it toward her. When I saw you out there, I thought maybe I was seeing a ghost. She didn't meet his eyes. Ghosts don't fight back. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed. What happened to you after... He let the question hang, unfinished, as if the past was too raw to name. Her shoulders stiffened. I survived, that's all. He wanted to push, to know, but the tone in her voice warned him away. The silence stretched, thick and unspoken. Finally, she broke it. Why did you step in tonight? He frowned. Because Jed would have killed you. Her gaze snapped to his, sharp. No, you don't believe that. You know I could have handled him. He hesitated, then nodded slowly. Yeah, I know. Then why? She pressed. He shifted uncomfortably, eyes dropping to the lantern flame. Because I couldn't stand to see them circle you, not again. The words lingered, heavy with memory. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't reply. The cabin grew quiet except for the faint hiss of the lantern. She leaned back in the chair, exhaustion finally seeping into her bones. He watched her for a long time, torn between the urge to protect and the knowledge that she didn't need saving. Outside, the night deepened. Coyotes howled in the distance, their cries carrying over the ridge. He crossed to the window, scanning the darkness. His instincts prickled. You think he'll come tonight? She asked softly. He didn't turn from the window. Jed's the kind who licks his wounds, waits until he thinks the odds are in his favor. He'll come, just not alone. Her eyes narrowed. Then let him. I'll be ready. He studied her reflection in the glass, unflinching, resolute. The years hadn't broken her. If anything, they'd forged her harder. But deep down, he feared what it would cost her to keep standing. He turned back, voice low. Don't mistake pride for strength. Even the strongest fall when too many guns are aimed their way. Her lips curved into a faint, bitter smile. Then maybe it's time the town saw what happens when you aim at the wrong person. The lantern flickered, shadows stretching across the walls like silent witnesses. Outside, in the dark beyond the ridge, unseen figures gathered. Bootsteps crunched softly in the dirt. Jed wasn't done. The cabin walls groaned softly in the wind, but the woman knew better. Those sounds weren't from wood. They were from boots pressing carefully against dry soil, from the weight of men circling in the dark. She rose from the table, silent as smoke, and moved to the window. The stranger was already there, lantern extinguished, rifle gripped loosely but ready. Their eyes met in the dim light, no words needed. Both understood. Jed had come sooner than expected. From the ridge, faint whispers carried. A horse snorted, quickly hushed. Metal clicked against leather, guns being checked, hammers drawn back. The man's voice was barely audible. "At least 6, maybe more." She nodded, scanning the tree line. "Jed doesn't like even odds." He allowed himself a grim smile. "Neither do I." She slipped to the far corner, crouching low. Her hand brushed the knife hidden at her waist, the familiar weight grounding her. She had faced worse than drunken cowboys, but this was different. This was vengeance burning in a man's pride, and that fire spread faster than any bullet. Outside, a voice broke the night. "Come on out!" Jed's tone was loud, mocking, meant to rattle. "Ain't no sense in hiding. You both know how this ends." The woman stepped closer to the window, calm but sharp. "Yes, with you gone." Jed's laugh echoed. "Still got that tongue on you, don't you? Let's see if you still have it when I drag you out myself." The man raised his rifle and fired, not at Jed but at the dirt near his boots. The shot cracked through the night, dust exploding. Jed flinched back, cursing. His men scattered, then regrouped, shouting. The stranger's voice carried steady, cold. "You step closer, Jed, and I stop aiming at dirt." For a moment, silence. Then Jed snarled. "Light it up." Torches flared, fire snapping to life in half a dozen hands. The glow painted the night in cruel orange, throwing jagged shadows against the cabin walls. The woman's pulse quickened. Fire meant more than fear. It meant they were willing to burn the place down with both of them inside. "They want to smoke us out," she muttered. The man nodded. "Then we don't give them the chance." He kicked over the table, flipping it on its side, creating a barrier. The woman darted behind it, knife glinting. He crouched at the window, firing again. A cry rang out. One of Jed's men dropped his torch, clutching his shoulder. The flames sputtered in the dirt, smoke curling upward. The rest shouted curses, returning fire. Bullets splintered the wooden walls, dust raining down inside the cabin. The smell of gunpowder thickened, sharp and suffocating. The woman pressed low, calm amid the chaos. "They'll surround us." "Cut us off." The man's jaw tightened. "Then we move first." She met his eyes. "You mean to run?" "No," he said, voice hard. "We break them before they think they've got us cornered." He reloaded, hands quick, practiced. She watched, then moved to the back door. She eased it open just enough to peer out. The firelight flickered on the ridge, but the rear path was darker, less guarded. "They're all at the front," she whispered. "We can flank." He joined her, rifle ready. Together, they slipped out, moving low, silent. The cold night air bit at their faces, but neither flinched. Each step was measured, deliberate. Around the side of the cabin, they caught sight of 2 men crouched near the porch, rifles trained on the front window. Their torches lay discarded, embers smoldering in the dirt. The woman moved first. She darted forward, swift as a shadow, her knife flashing. One man fell without a sound, throat cut clean. The second turned in shock, but the stranger's rifle butt smashed into his skull before he could cry out. Both bodies crumpled. Silence reclaimed the shadows. They dragged the men out of sight, then pressed on, circling toward the ridge. Torches bobbed above, Jed's men restless, shouting, trying to keep courage alive. Jed's voice cut through the night. "Burn it down!" "I want their screams louder than the fire." The woman's jaw clenched. She whispered, "If they set it alight, the town will see. He doesn't care." The stranger's eyes narrowed. "Jed never cared. This is about him proving he owns fear." They crouched in the brush, watching the gang close in with torches raised high. The firelight flickered across their faces, some nervous, some eager, all bound by Jed's pride. The stranger chambered another round, whispering, "We dropped the torches first, then the men." She nodded, steady as stone. Together, they rose from the dark, weapons ready. The first shot cracked, torch tumbling to the dirt, flames dying. The second man screamed as her knife pierced his ribs, his torch falling into the dust. Chaos erupted. Jed's men shouted, scrambling, firing wildly into the night. The woman and the stranger struck fast, moving between shadow and flame, turning the hunters into prey. Jed roared above the noise, his face twisted with fury, torch blazing in his hand. "Find them! Kill them both!" The night exploded in fire, smoke, and gunfire, 2 against many, yet neither yielding. But as the fight raged, a new sound rose, hoofbeats pounding fast from the south. Jed froze, head whipping toward the noise, eyes wide. Reinforcements were coming. But not his. The hoofbeats grew louder, echoing off the ridge like thunder. Jed's men faltered, torn between pressing the attack and turning to see what new storm was about to break. The Apache woman crouched low in the brush, her knife slick with blood, her breath steady despite the chaos. The stranger tightened his grip on the rifle, eyes narrowing toward the south. Through the dust and firelight, the riders emerged, 4 of them, dark silhouettes against the moon. No torches, no shouting, just the steady rhythm of horses driven hard through the night. Jed cursed under his breath. "Damn it, who the hell?" One of his men called out nervously. "Looks like scouts, military, maybe." But as the riders drew closer, the truth revealed itself. Their clothing wasn't military, no uniforms, no polished gear. These were Apache. Jed's face twisted in panic, though he tried to mask it with anger. "For you got to be kidding me." The gang shifted uneasily. Fighting one woman in the dark was one thing. Facing her kin, armed, mounted, and unafraid, was another matter entirely. The riders slowed, fanning out, their horses snorting clouds into the night. At their center rode an older man, his hair streaked with silver, his frame lean but unbroken. He carried no gun, only a bow across his saddle, and a calm authority that quieted the chaos around him. The Apache woman stepped from the shadows, knife lowered but eyes sharp. The older man's gaze fixed on her instantly. "Dana," he said, voice steady, carrying across the firelit street. The saloon crowd, who had crept back to watch from the safety of doorways, exchanged whispers. The name carried weight, even among those who pretended not to know. Jed spat into the dirt. "So that's it. You went and called your people to finish what you couldn't." The older man didn't even glance at him. His eyes stayed on the woman. "We heard your name carried through this town again. Too many mouths speaking it without respect." Her jaw tightened. "I didn't ask for help." He inclined his head slightly. "No, but we came." The stranger shifted, rifle still trained on Jed's men. He muttered under his breath, just loud enough for her to hear. "Family." Her silence was answer enough. Jed's face flushed crimson. "You think you can walk in here and scare me with a few painted riders? I don't care who you are. This is my town, my word." The older Apache finally turned his gaze to him, calm and unflinching. "Your word means nothing. You spit it into the dust like cheap whiskey. Tonight it ends." Jed's hand hovered at his revolver, but his men were already breaking. 2 dropped their torches, backing away toward the saloon. Another muttered, "Jed, we didn't sign up to fight no Apache war party." "Shut up," Jed roared, but the cracks in his command were showing. The bravado that had carried him through the saloon earlier was crumbling in the face of men who didn't fear him, and a woman who had already stripped him of pride. The Apache woman stepped forward, her voice low, but cutting through the night. "This ends now, Jed. You walk away and maybe you keep breathing. Push further, and not even your own men will follow you." Jed's hand trembled at his side. His pride screamed for blood, but survival gnawed at him. His eyes darted to the townsfolk watching, to his wavering men, to the Apaches on horseback who sat like shadows carved from stone. Finally, he snarled, voice breaking, "This ain't over. You hear me? This ain't—" The older Apache cut him off with a single sharp word in his own tongue. The sound was harsh, final, a command that silenced even the night insects. Jed swallowed, rage choking him. With a final glare, he shoved past his men and stalked toward the horses tied near the saloon. One by one, the gang followed, some muttering curses, others too relieved to be leaving alive. The torches fizzled in the dirt, smoke curling into the cold air. Silence reclaimed the ridge. The older Apache dismounted slowly, his boots crunching in the dust. He approached the woman, studying her with a mixture of sternness and weary affection. "You still carry the storm with you," he said softly, "but storms don't always need to break." She met his gaze, unflinching. "Sometimes they do." The stranger lowered his rifle, watching the exchange. He could feel the weight of history between them, words unspoken, debts unpaid. The townsfolk, sensing the danger had passed for now, slipped back into the saloon, whispers rising again. But none dared laugh, none dared call names, because everyone had seen what Jed refused to believe. The Apache woman wasn't prey. She was the storm itself, and storms never truly pass. They wait. The night grew still after Jed and his men disappeared into the dark, but the silence was thin, brittle. Dana stood with her knife still at her side, her chest rising and falling in steady rhythm, though her pulse hadn't slowed. The older Apache's presence was both a comfort and a weight. His words carried authority she had never fully accepted. The stranger leaned his rifle against the cabin wall and wiped sweat from his brow. "They'll be back," he said flatly. The older man nodded. "Jed's kind always come back. A man humiliated before his pack can't live with it. He'll bleed himself dry to prove he's not broken." Dana sheathed her knife, her jaw tightening. "Then let him come. He already knows he can't scare me." The elder studied her in silence, the lantern light casting deep lines across his weathered face. "Bravery and stubbornness look the same under fire. One saves lives, the other takes them." The words stung more than she let show. She turned away, pacing toward the shadows at the edge of the ridge. The stranger's eyes followed her, wary but understanding. He addressed the elder quietly. "You know her better than anyone. She doesn't scare easy." The old man's lips pressed into a thin line. "She doesn't scare at all. That's the danger. A warrior who has no fear forgets how to live." The stranger nodded slowly. He knew the truth of it. He had seen it before, in battlefields and barrooms, in men who thought themselves untouchable until the bullet found them. Dana reappeared from the shadows, her voice sharp. "Talking about me like I'm not here won't change anything." The elder turned his gaze on her, unwavering. "Then listen, Dana. Jed won't stop. He'll gather more. Men who owe him, men who want blood. And when he comes, it won't be with torches and shouting. It will be with rifles, with fire that burns homes and people alike." Her chin lifted, defiant. "And what do you expect me to do? Run? Hide?" The elder shook his head slowly. "Choose. Decide whether this fight is only yours or if you're dragging others into it." The words hung heavy. The stranger shifted uncomfortably, sensing the wound beneath them wasn't new. Dana's eyes narrowed. "I didn't ask for anyone to come. Not you, not him." She jerked her chin toward the stranger. "This is my fight." The elder sighed, the weight of years pressing on his shoulders. "No fight is ever only yours. Not when blood stains more than your own hands." The tension crackled, thicker than gunpowder. The stranger stepped in, his voice even. "Arguing won't stop Jed. He's probably already planning his next move." Dana turned sharply. "You sound like you know him." The stranger's eyes darkened. "I know men like him. Pride makes them dangerous. Desperation makes them reckless. He's both now." The elder gave a small nod of agreement. "He'll strike where he thinks you're weakest. Not here, not face to face. He'll look for the shadows you don't guard." The thought tightened Dana's chest. She had lived her life watching for knives in the dark, for betrayal behind smiles. Jed was nothing new. And yet, the weight of the town's stares, the whispers, the constant threat of men like him, it all pressed heavier tonight. She moved to the cabin doorway, staring out into the desert beyond. The stars were sharp and cold, scattered across the sky like flint sparks. Her voice dropped low, almost to herself. "If he wants me, he'll find me ready. I won't live bent under his shadow." The stranger stepped closer, his tone firm. "Then you won't face him alone." She shot him a glance, something between suspicion and gratitude. "You didn't have to step in tonight. You didn't have to stay." He held her gaze, unflinching. "Maybe not. But I did." The elder watched them both, eyes narrowing. There was history here, unspoken, unfinished. He turned back toward his horse, his voice low but clear. "Jed's pride may burn hot, but pride alone doesn't raise an army. If he finds allies, men with grudges, men hungry for coin, this fight will grow. Bigger than one woman, bigger than this town." The warning sat heavy in the air. Dana's hand brushed the hilt of her knife again, an unconscious habit. "Then we'll cut it down before it grows." The stranger frowned. "Easier said than done." The elder mounted his horse slowly, his joints stiff. "I'll send word. Not all will come, but some still remember what it means to stand." He looked down at Dana, his eyes softer now. "Storms don't wait for permission, but sometimes they need a direction." With that, he turned his horse, the other riders following. Their silhouettes melted into the night, leaving only the faint sound of hooves fading into the desert. The stranger and Dana stood alone again by the cabin, the quiet pressing in. He finally spoke. "He's right. You know. Jed won't stop." Dana's gaze was fixed on the horizon, where the darkness seemed thicker, heavier. "Then neither will I." Inside, the lantern flickered, shadows shifting on the wooden walls. Outside, somewhere in the town, Jed nursed his pride with whiskey and hate, whispering to new ears, buying loyalty with silver and promises of blood. The war hadn't ended tonight. It had only just begun. Jed's boots staggered across the warped planks of the saloon porch, his jaw clenched tight, his knuckles still raw where the Apache woman had twisted his wrist. Inside, the Red Spur was quieter than usual. Patrons whispering in corners, eyes darting away when his shadow crossed the doorframe. The laughter that had once followed Jed died in their throats now. He shoved the door open, the hinges shrieking. "Whiskey," he barked at the bartender. "And keep it coming." The old man poured with shaking hands, but said nothing. Everyone had seen what happened outside. Everyone knew Jed's pride had been broken in front of the whole town, and men like Jed didn't heal wounds with silence. They healed them with blood. Jed downed the first glass in a single swallow, then slammed it onto the counter. His gang lingered nearby, some tending to bruises, others nursing fresh cuts. They looked less like outlaws tonight and more like beaten dogs. Jed's eyes burned at the sight. "You think it's over," he growled. "You think I'm going to let her walk away after that?" One of his men shifted uneasily. "She ain't alone, Jed. She's got that stranger with her, and now—" He hesitated. "Now her people know she's here." Jed's fist cracked against the bar. "I don't care if she's got 100 of them. She humiliated me in my own town. You know what happens if we let that stand. Every man who ever looked at me sideways will see weakness. We'll be ghosts by winter." The room stayed quiet. Pride was one thing. Survival was another. Jed leaned forward, lowering his voice but sharpening it like a blade. "I've already sent word. Men from the hills, boys from the mines, they're hungry. Hungry for coin, hungry for blood. I'll pay 'em both. And when they come, we'll put that squaw in the dirt where she belongs." Another man spoke, his voice thin. "And the stranger?" Jed's eyes narrowed. "He dies, too. He made me look like a fool. Nobody makes me bleed and lives to brag about it." His gang exchanged nervous glances, but the weight of his fury pinned them silent. By midnight, the saloon's back room filled with new faces, hard-eyed men from the outskirts, miners with soot still in their beards, drifters with guns that had seen too much use. Jed laid out the promise clear. Silver up front, more after the job. "Not just a fight," he told them. "This is a message. Nobody crosses me. Nobody sides with her. By the time we're done, folks'll forget they ever thought she was dangerous." A scarred miner spat tobacco into a bucket, then muttered, "Or they'll remember her more. Fear's a tricky beast." Jed shot him a glare sharp enough to silence the thought. "When the ground's red, fear won't matter. Only power." The recruits nodded, some with greed in their eyes, others with dread. A few hesitated, but Jed's silver clinked loud on the table, and hesitation shrank under hunger. Meanwhile, outside town, the night carried whispers. Dana sat by the cabin fire, her eyes fixed on the flames but her mind far beyond them. The stranger paced slowly, restless, while the desert wind rattled the shutters. "They're not done," he said finally. She didn't look up. "I know." He stopped pacing, leaning on the table. "Jed's gathering men, more than before. He won't come at you straight. He'll swarm." Her fingers traced the edge of the knife she had cleaned, its blade catching the firelight. "Then let him swarm. The desert swallows men like him." The stranger frowned. "You can't keep standing alone against numbers. Even storms break when too many wolves rise against them." Dana's eyes flicked up, sharp. Then maybe it's time the walls fall. Their words hung heavy, broken only by the fire's crackle. At dawn, riders began trickling into town. Strangers, rough men who smelled of gunpowder and dust. Jed greeted each with a silver coin and a promise of more. By noon, the saloon was thick with the stench of ambition and violence. One of his old gang leaned close, whispering, "This many men, Jed, and the law might come knocking." Jed sneered, "The law? In this town? The sheriff's more scared of me than any Apache. He won't lift a finger." But in truth, Jed knew the sheriff wasn't the problem. The problem was what fear turned into when it festered too long. Townsfolk had seen Dana stand her ground. They had seen Jed flinch. If he didn't crush her completely, whispers would eat his power alive. So he laid his plan clear. They would ride at dusk, surround the ridge, and end it in one blaze of fire and lead. The men cheered, some eager, some hollow. Jed's grin returned, but it was brittle, desperate. Back at the cabin, Dana rose, stepping into the morning light. She scanned the horizon, listening, feeling the shift in the air. "They're coming," she murmured. The stranger joined her, rifle in hand. "Then we need allies." She shook her head. "No. Allies bring debt. Debt brings chains." He studied her, frustrated but unwilling to push further. "Then what's your plan?" Her eyes narrowed, sharp as the desert sun. "To show Jed what happens when a man builds his power on fear, fear turns." As if to prove her words, far off in the town, Jed's new army drank, boasted, and argued. And among them, cracks were already forming. Greed against loyalty, fear against bravado. Jed didn't see it. He only saw the fire in his own rage. And as the sun dipped low, painting the desert blood red, the storm gathered on both sides. By dusk, the horizon burned with the glow of torches. The sound reached first, a low rumble of hoofbeats, the clink of rifles against saddles, the uneven chorus of drunken shouts carried by the wind. Dana stood at the edge of the ridge, her knife in hand, eyes fixed on the approaching storm. The stranger crouched by the cabin door, rifle across his knees, his face tight with calculation. "They brought more than I thought," he muttered. Dana didn't flinch. Numbers don't make men stronger, just louder. But even she felt the weight of it. At least 20 riders, torches bobbing like fireflies, their formation messy but their intent clear. Jed led them, face twisted with triumph already, as though the firelight itself had crowned him. He raised his revolver skyward, firing once. The shot cracked through the night. "Bring the place down, burn 'em out if you have to." The riders howled, splitting into two groups, circling the ridge. The ground shook under the horses, dust rising in clouds. The stranger chambered around, voice low. "We'll hold the front. Can't let 'em circle behind too fast." Dana nodded. She crouched low, moving with the precision of someone who had lived through ambushes before. Her hand brushed the dirt, testing its dryness, its silence, then gripped the hilt of her knife tighter. The first torch came sailing through the air, arcing toward the cabin's roof. The stranger fired. Splinters exploded from the wooden porch as the man who'd thrown it toppled from his saddle. Torch snuffed in the dirt. Chaos followed. Gunfire cracked. Bullets tearing into the cabin walls. Jed's men whooped and cursed, their voices loud to mask their fear. Horses screamed, hooves pounding in panic as the ridge erupted into violence. The stranger ducked back inside, reloading quick. Dana slipped to the rear door, silent as a shadow. Through the slit between boards, she watched two riders creeping close, torches in hand. She moved before they reached the walls, slipping out, cutting low, fast. One torch fell into the dust with a hiss as its bearer gurgled, throat opened by her blade. The second turned, too slow. Her knife sank deep under his ribs, his eyes wide with shock before he crumpled. She dragged both bodies into the brush, already gone before the rest noticed. Inside, the stranger fired again, dropping another rider. But for everyone that fell, two more pressed forward, bullets punched through the walls, wood splintering dangerously close. "Too many," he hissed through gritted teeth. Dana slipped back in, calm despite the storm. "Then we bleed them faster." The cabin shook as another torch slammed against the side, flames licking the boards. The stranger grabbed a bucket, doused it, but more torches followed. Smoke thickened, bitter and choking. Jed's voice roared over the chaos. "Burn 'em out, leave nothing standing." The stranger's jaw clenched. "If they pin us in here, we're done." Dana's eyes darted to the ridge. "Then we don't stay in here." She pushed open the back door, scanning the shadows. Gunfire flared at the front. Jed's men focused there. The rear was weaker, careless. She looked back at the stranger. "Follow me." He hesitated. "Where?" "Into the dark, where they can't see." Bullets ripped into the walls again. He cursed, then slung his rifle over his shoulder and followed. They darted through the brush, low and swift, the smoke covering their escape. Behind them, the cabin walls hissed under fresh flames. Jed's men cheered, thinking their prey trapped. Jed himself rode closer, revolver raised. "That's it, burn 'em alive." But when the roof crackled and collapsed, sparks exploding into the night, there were no screams. Jed's grin faltered. "Where are they?" one of his men muttered nervously. Dana and the stranger crouched at the far side of the ridge, shadows hiding them. Her breath was steady, her knife glinting faintly. She whispered, "Let them celebrate, then we strike." The stranger nodded, reloading in silence. In the fire's glow, Jed dismounted, striding toward the collapsing cabin, chest swelling with victory. "Bring me their bodies," he barked. His men advanced cautiously, rifles ready. Smoke swirled around them, flames snapping loud in the still night. Then a shot cracked from the ridge. One man dropped, torch scattering sparks. Another spun in panic, firing wildly into the dark. Jed cursed, realizing too late, "They're not inside, they're out there." The ridge erupted in chaos again. Gunfire from the shadows, knives flashing between brush and torchlight. Jed's men scrambled, confused, shouting over each other. Horses reared, terrified, throwing riders into the dirt. Dana moved like smoke, striking and vanishing. The stranger's rifle barked steady, each shot deliberate. Jed fired blindly, fury twisting his features. His men fell one by one, their numbers thinning under the weight of shadows and silence. Still, rage kept him rooted. He howled into the night, spittle flying. "You can't kill me. You hear me? You can't—" His words cut short as a bullet whined past his ear, shaving splinters off the post beside him. He froze, eyes darting, breath ragged. For the first time, Jed felt it, the cold edge of fear. And Dana was still out there watching. The flames from the cabin cast long, jagged shadows across the ridge, throwing Jed's men into a blur of fire and panic. Smoke stung their eyes, torches flickered wildly, and every shout blended into a storm of confusion. Jed stumbled back from the collapsing roof, his revolver clenched tight, his chest heaving. His men were breaking. He could feel it. Two had bolted already, galloping into the dark without a word. Others fired wildly, hitting nothing but trees and dirt. "Hold the line!" he roared, voice cracking. "She's just one woman, one!" But the words rang hollow, lost in the chaos. Everyone had seen her strike. Everyone had felt the sting of fear she left behind. From the brush, a shot cracked. Another man dropped, screaming. His torch rolled into the dirt, sputtering out. Jed spun, firing into the shadows. "Come out! Face me like you mean it!" The night answered with silence. Then another shot, another body. The stranger's voice carried from somewhere unseen, steady and cold. "You wanted her blood. Now it's yours spilling." Jed's heart thudded hard, fear clawing at the edges. He fired blindly again, the muzzle flash lighting his wild eyes. "You think you can scare me?" he bellowed. But even he heard the tremor in his own voice. Behind him, one of his new recruits grabbed at his arm. "Jed, we're outnumbered in the dark. This ain't worth it." Jed shoved him away, fury spilling out. "Outnumbered? You cowards outnumbered her 10-1, and she's cutting you down like cattle." His spit flew, his eyes bloodshot. "You think you can just walk away? You walk, and you're next on my list." But his words no longer held power. The man spat at his boots, then fled into the night, rifle clattering to the ground. Jed's jaw clenched, rage shaking through him. He could feel control slipping like water through his fingers. He turned back to the blaze, screaming into the smoke. "Where are you, squaw? Where are you hiding?" Dana's voice cut through the crackle of fire, calm, almost soft. "Closer than you think." Jed spun, eyes wide, but saw only flame and shadow. Sweat poured down his face, his revolver hand trembling. He backed toward his horse, desperate for open ground. A figure darted from the brush. The stranger, rifle raised. Jed fired, the bullet missing wide. The rifle butt slammed against Jed's jaw, sending him sprawling into the dirt. His revolver flew from his hand, clattering across the ground. For a moment, everything stopped. The stranger loomed over him, rifle barrel leveled at his chest. Jed's breath came ragged, fury mixing with fear. But before the shot fell, Dana stepped from the shadows. Her knife glinted in the firelight, her eyes cold and steady. "Not yet." The stranger hesitated, lowering the rifle slightly. Jed scrambled backward, coughing in the smoke, his pride clawing for words. "You think this ends me? You think the town will follow you?" Dana crouched, her knife hovering inches from his throat. Her voice was steady, sharp enough to cut through his bravado. "The town already saw you fall. Tonight just proves it." Jed's eyes flicked wildly, searching for any of his men, but most were gone. Those who remained stood frozen at a distance, unwilling to move, unwilling to fight. Their faces told the truth. Jed was finished. He tried one last card, his voice breaking. "If you kill me, you'll bring more down on you. My cousins, my partners." Dana pressed the blade lightly against his skin, silencing him with a breath. "Then let them come." Jed swallowed hard, sweat dripping into his eyes. His body shook, but his pride forced one last defiance. "You'll regret sparing me. You'll—" The stranger cut him off, rifle pressing harder into his chest. "She's not sparing you. She's showing everyone what you really are." Jed froze, realizing too late what they meant. His men, the townsfolk who had crept to the ridge's edge, even the bartender who stood pale in the distance, all had seen. Jed wasn't the predator tonight. He was the prey. The fire behind him roared, collapsing the last of the cabin roof. Sparks shot into the sky, lighting the faces of everyone watching. Jed lay in the dirt, unarmed, trembling, his name crumbling with every breath. Dana stood slowly, knife still in hand, her gaze sweeping over the crowd that had gathered at the edge of the chaos. This is what fear looks like when it rules a man. The silence was thick, unbroken, until Jed let out a ragged scream. Scrambling to his feet, snatching a fallen torch, he swung it wildly, madness twisting his face. "I'll burn you all!" But before he could strike, the stranger's rifle cracked. The torch flew from Jed's hands, sparks scattering into the dust. Jed staggered back, clutching his arm, blood seeping between his fingers. He collapsed again, gasping, broken. The crowd shifted uneasily, whispers rising. Jed had been the terror of White Butte for years, but tonight his fear had undone him, and Dana wasn't done. She stepped closer, voice steady, carrying into every ear. "This isn't just about me. This is about all of you. How long have you let men like him decide what you fear?" The townsfolk lowered their eyes, shame heavy in their silence. Jed moaned in the dirt, his voice a rasp. "You can't stop me." But even he didn't believe it anymore. The night had stripped him bare, and as the firelight flickered against the ridge, everyone knew Jed's reign had ended. The fire had begun to die, leaving the ridge cloaked in smoke and silence. Jed lay in the dirt, clutching his bleeding arm, his breaths ragged and uneven. His men had melted away into the night, their loyalty scattered like ash. Only a handful lingered at a distance, too afraid to help, too ashamed to stay. The townsfolk gathered at the edges of the scene, whispering, their faces pale in the glow of dying embers. For years, Jed had ruled them with fists and fear. Now they watched him crawl, broken and humiliated. Dana stood tall, knife still in hand, her shadow long against the smoke. The stranger loomed beside her, rifle steady, eyes fixed on Jed. Neither spoke. The silence itself was heavier than words. Jed's lips trembled. For a moment, it seemed he might beg. But then his eyes narrowed, a spark of rage flaring through the pain. "You think you've beaten me," he rasped, his voice raw. "You don't know the men I know, the favors I'm owed. You'll never sleep again without wondering who's riding for your blood. Dana stepped closer, crouching low so her face hovered inches from his. Her voice was calm, steady as stone. Then ride with them, Jed. You'll find me waiting. Her words made his breath hitch. He wanted to spit in her face, to curse her name, but something in her gaze froze the words in his throat. The stranger shifted his weight, rifle aimed. It's over, Jed. You've lost. But Jed wasn't done. He slammed his good hand into the dirt, pushing himself up. His body shook with pain, but desperation gave him strength. His eyes darted wildly, past the stranger, past Dana, toward the crowd, toward the saloon. And then they saw it. The revolver he had dropped earlier still lay half-hidden in the dirt, just beyond his reach. His eyes locked on it, and the fire in him burned again. The stranger saw it too. Don't, he warned, but Jed lunged, dragging himself across the ground, fingers clawing toward the weapon. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some shouted, others backed away, panic rising again. Dana moved first. She kicked the revolver, sending it spinning across the dirt, sparks flying as metal scraped rock. Jed screamed, fury tearing from his throat, and lunged after it. His body collapsed into the dust, arms stretching, fingertips grazing the grip. The stranger's rifle cocked. Jed! But Dana lifted a hand, stopping him. Her eyes never left Jed. No, let him try. The crowd held its breath. Jed's face twisted, veins bulging, as he dragged himself inch by inch, his body trembling from loss of blood. Each crawl forward smeared the dirt red. His breathing grew louder, harsher, like a wounded animal. He reached the revolver, fingers closing around the handle. Triumph flickered in his eyes, mad, desperate triumph. But when he tried to raise it, his arm shook violently. His hand was too weak, his grip slipping. The weapon trembled, rising only halfway before falling back into the dirt. Jed let out a guttural cry, smashing his fist into the ground. His pride, his last weapon, had betrayed him. The townsfolk murmured, their whispers carrying judgment now, not fear. For the first time, Jed's power was gone, not stripped away by bullets, but by his own weakness. He tried again, lifting the revolver with both hands this time. His body shook, blood soaking his shirt, teeth gritted. He forced it upward, aiming not at Dana, not at the stranger, but at the crowd itself. His voice broke, screaming, "If I fall, I take you all with me." The crowd scattered, shouts and cries filling the night. Women pulled children back, men ducked into doorways. Jed's finger tightened on the trigger. The stranger raised his rifle. "Enough!" But Dana's voice cut through the chaos. "Wait!" Her eyes locked on Jed. No fear, no mercy, only the weight of every scar she carried. She stepped closer, knife glinting in the smoke. "You want to kill? Then look at me when you do it." Jed's arm trembled violently, the revolver wavering between her and the faceless crowd. His breaths came in ragged gasps, his finger twitching. The moment stretched thin, fragile as glass. One wrong move and the street would drown in blood. The stranger's finger tightened on his trigger, sweat dripping down his brow. The crowd's whispers turned to silence, all eyes fixed on the woman and the man who refused to die. Jed's eyes burned, wide and wild. He screamed, his voice breaking into madness. And then, the revolver fired. The shot echoed through the ridge, louder than thunder, shattering the silence into shards. But when the smoke cleared, it wasn't Dana who had fallen. The crack of the revolver split the night, echoing off the ridge and carrying far into the desert. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. Smoke curled lazily from the muzzle, drifting into the firelit haze. Then the cries came. The stranger staggered back, rifle slipping from his hands, blood spread across his shoulder, dark and heavy. He gritted his teeth, biting down a groan, but his knees buckled under the weight. "No!" Dana lunged forward, catching him before he crumpled to the ground. She steadied him against her, her knife still clutched tight in her other hand. Her eyes snapped to Jed. Jed swayed on his knees, revolver trembling in his bloody hands. His eyes burned with manic triumph, spit flying from his lips. "Got him!" he rasped, voice ragged. "Got your savior." The crowd gasped, their fear thick in the air. Some began to retreat, certain the storm was about to spill over them too. But Dana didn't move back. She lowered the stranger carefully to the ground, then stood. Her knife gleamed in the flickering firelight, her face carved from stone. Jed tried to raise the revolver again, but his hands shook too badly. The barrel wavered, unsteady. He barked a laugh that broke into a cough, blood flecking his lips. "I'll think you scare me. You ain't nothing, just a savage with a blade." Dana stepped forward, one step, then another. Her boots crunched in the dirt, her eyes never leaving his. Jed screamed hoarsely, pulling the trigger again. Click. The chamber was empty. He pulled again. Click. The hollow sound echoed louder than the first shot. The silence from the crowd pressed tighter, their eyes locked on her as she closed the distance. Jed's voice broke into a plea, though he tried to mask it as rage. "Stay back, I'll kill you." She crouched before him, calm as the night. Her knife hovered at his throat. "You've already killed yourself," she said softly. He froze, the fight draining from his eyes. For the first time, Jed looked small, his shoulders hunched, his breath shallow, his power stripped bare under the weight of her gaze. The stranger groaned from the ground, struggling to rise. "Dana," she flicked her eyes toward him, then back to Jed. She pressed the knife lightly against his skin, just enough to make him sweat. "Every man you ruled by fear is watching you now. What should they see? Your blood or your shame?" Jed's lips trembled, the revolver slipping fully from his hand into the dirt. His pride had driven him to the edge, but shame was the knife that cut deepest. The crowd murmured, some nodding, some whispering. They had feared Jed for years, but here, under the broken firelight, they saw the truth. He was no leader. He was a coward, dragging others into his pit. Dana stood slowly, pulling the knife away. She turned, her voice carrying across the ridge. "This town belongs to none of us, not me, not him. But tonight you choose who rules your lives, your fear of him or your courage to stand without it." Her words fell heavy, echoing in the hearts of every man and woman who listened. Behind her, Jed whimpered, clutching his useless arm, too broken to rise. The stranger pushed himself up with effort, blood dripping from his sleeve, but his eyes burned steady. "She's right. If you leave him standing, you'll spend the rest of your lives on your knees. If you walk away, tonight is the last night his name carries weight." The townsfolk shifted, shame etched on their faces. Then, slowly, one man stepped forward, the bartender. His hands shook, but his voice was clear. "We're done being afraid, Jed." Another joined him, then another. Soon the whole crowd was moving, surrounding Jed, their silence louder than any shout. Jed's eyes darted wildly, panic blooming. "No, you need me. You think you can stand without me?" But no one answered. They only stood, watching, their shadows long in the fading firelight. Jed's revolver lay in the dirt, useless. His voice cracked into a sob, the last ember of his pride smothered by the weight of their stares. Dana turned away from him, moving to the stranger's side. She pressed a cloth against his wound, her hand steady. "You'll live," she murmured. He managed a faint smile, despite the pain. "You sound sure." "I am—" Behind them, Jed cried out one last time, a desperate, broken howl, but no one lifted him, no one answered. His reign had ended not with a bullet in his chest, but with the silence of those who no longer feared his name. The fire hissed low, the last embers dying into ash. The night grew quiet again, different now, heavier, freer. And as Dana helped the stranger to his feet, the crowd parted for them, their eyes following not with fear but with something else. Respect. The storm had broken, but the desert never forgot. The ridge lay quiet, blanketed by smoke and silence. The cabin was gone, reduced to smouldering embers, but its ashes seemed less a loss than a cleansing. For the first time in years, the air didn't carry Jed's name like a shadow. Dana stood with the stranger, his arm draped over her shoulder as she steadied him down the slope. His blood had slowed, the cloth binding his wound soaked but holding. Every step was heavy, but he pushed forward, unwilling to fall. The townsfolk followed at a distance, hushed. No one dared speak Jed's name anymore. His broken figure had been left behind, crumpled in the dirt, stripped of the power that had ruled them for too long. Whether he lived through the night no longer mattered. His reign was over. At the base of the ridge, Dana helped the stranger onto a fallen log. She knelt, tightening the bandage, her touch precise. The firelight caught her face, revealing not triumph, but exhaustion etched deep into her features. "You should rest," she said quietly. He managed a weak smile. "Rest feels like a luxury out here." Her eyes flicked up, meeting his. "Then take it while you can. Tomorrow will come fast." They sat in silence for a while, the desert night wrapping around them. Coyotes howled in the distance, but their cries no longer felt like warnings, only reminders that the land belonged to none, and to all. The bartender approached carefully, hat in his hands. "Miss, we ain't got much, but if you need a place, food, anything, you'll find it." Dana's eyes softened slightly. She wasn't used to offers, not from townsfolk who had once turned away. "I didn't fight for a bed," she said. "I fought because fear shouldn't own anyone." The man swallowed, nodding. "Maybe we forgot that." He turned back toward the others, who lingered with shame and awe, waiting for guidance that Dana never offered. The stranger leaned back against the log, his breath still heavy but steadier. "They'll need you, you know. Maybe not as chief, maybe not as leader, but as a reminder. Jed's kind don't vanish. Another will rise." Her jaw tightened. "Then I'll face them too." His gaze lingered on her, admiration mixed with worry. "You can't fight every storm alone." She looked out over the horizon, where the first faint hint of dawn touched the black sky. "I don't have to. Tonight proved that." The townsfolk slowly drifted back toward their homes, the whispers fading with them. By morning, news of Jed's fall would spread like wildfire. Some would mourn him, others would curse him, but most would simply learn to live without his shadow. As the night gave way to pale light, Dana stood, scanning the desert one last time. The stranger rose slowly beside her, favoring his shoulder, but refusing to falter. "What now?" he asked. Her voice was steady. "Now we rebuild, not houses, not fences, ourselves." He nodded, silent. Together, they walked toward the town, their silhouettes framed by the rising sun. Behind them, the ridge smoldered, smoke curling into the morning sky. Ahead, a community waited, uncertain but no longer silent. For Dana, it wasn't victory she carried. It was the memory of every scar, every loss, every moment when the world had tried to make her small. Tonight had proved what she already knew. Storms don't ask permission to rise. They break, and in breaking, they change everything. And for the first time, the town of White Butte understood. Stories like Dana's remind us that courage is not the absence of fear. It's standing when fear tries to own you. If this story moved you, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next tale we share. And if you're ready for another powerful journey, watch the next video on your screen. You won't want to miss it.